Notice meeting of the Shorewood Village Board to order at 6:16 p.m. All trustees and businesses meeting with regular notice.
It has.
Thank you. We have just a single item on the agenda tonight, consideration of 2017 budget hearing recommendation. So with that, I'll turn it over to our village manager.
As you know, where Mark's here, he has given me two documents. I'm going to one document and then a response to Trustee Rovek's questions and comments. So we're going to have Mark provide the introduction. As you know, after this meeting tomorrow morning, we will publish. So that's why we'll publish what we're going to put into the publication. We're going to publish tomorrow. I mean, we're going to bring it to the newspaper tomorrow. Publishing the week from Thursday.
Sorry, Chris, what's that second document you held up?
It was something from Mark.
There was an email response from Trustee Rosek's inquiries.
We can ask Tyler to make some more.
Okay.
He's not going to start with that.
Okay.
Okay, so with that, you're going to start with the budget workshop.
Sure, I can certainly do that.
Tyler.
You might want to give some, well, let me give some preamble on this too. We've had how many, we had four budget workshop meetings, and that were conducted by the Budget and Finance Committee. The purpose of the meetings was to go through all of the budget that staff had prepared, and at that time, everybody was supposed to make any comments that were going to be possibly looked at later. So we were hoping that everybody would make their comments during the budget workshops, and this is the way that we've been doing this ever since I've been around here too. So with that, I'll have you.
Greg, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
If we want to propose an amendment, should we wait till November? I thought last year we did that actually at November 14th meeting when we actually adopt. Is that correct? On the wrap up, we're just kind of talking about issues.
If you want to propose an amendment.
Yeah. let's
I can touch on that.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Good evening. This is the budget wrap-up session, the fifth budget review workshop, and this also being a board meeting. Again, as President Johnson summarized, we've had a number of budget workshop sessions. Try to present, start off with a really global look of how the budget's coming together, some of the formation issues, how staff approaches certain budget estimates. We also had a number of significant changes and events that impacted the proposed budget. Those were all outlined in the first session, trying to give context to the budget as a whole. After those presentations, we went through all the general fund departments with all the appropriate staff present to address any additional questions that the board had. We then moved into some of the other funds, capital funds, special revenue funds, library, and then kind of concluded with the water, sewer, and parking utilities. The result of all of those discussions and the feedback is that we were able to present at the budget hearings themselves or through follow-up documents is a list of 14 items that were identified as wanting additional considerations before we come up with a final proposed budget for the trustees to consider adoption on. In addition to that, on the front page of this document here, for items 15 through 21, which are all capital items that did not get forwarded or were amended by staff prior to the proposed 2017 2017 budget. So we wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to evaluate staff decisions not to forward those requests at this time. Should you decide that they merit additional consideration, at your discretion, you may reinstate them. The second page then is what we call staff updates. As staff prepares the budget, we are compelled to make a number of estimates based on best information available at the time. Share revenue, expenditure restraint aids, transportation aids, some of the larger public safety contracts with the North Shore Fire Department and the Tri-Com Dispatch. Also in this list is...
You're talking about after item 32.
We're talking about items 22 to 32 at this point.
22 to 32 are different from 121.
That is correct.
Okay.
So these are the staff adjustments that
Okay.
we have gained additional information since the time that this document was prepared. They're what I would call dial-in numbers. You know, the situation has changed. We've updated our proposed budget to include these items as being more accurate for the budget presentation. Items 28 through 30 relate to the fact that for the second year in a row, staff has been able to negotiate with United Healthcare, and they have committed to a 0% increase in health insurance premiums. The original budget had forecast a 3% increase in premiums. Since this is such a large item, even a 3% reduction to 0% has a significant budget impact. Items 31 and 32 are not tax levy impact items, although they are again changes to the budget document themselves. Number 31, staff has analyzed the developer's agreement with the HRA site and assessed values for 2016 and has estimated that $110,000 in addition to the TID increment will be due from HRA under the terms of the developer agreement, which guarantees a minimum of $20 million assessment value for increment contributions.
And so HRA is Harbor Chase,
That is correct.
so they're going to pay us $110,000.
Correct. We had that situation a couple of years ago with the White Horse project when they fell behind on construction. A little different scenario there. And again, that's all under the terms of the developer's agreement. So that's been added to the TID 3 budget as a revenue source. Being that it's in a TID budget, it doesn't impact tax levy. And then also, as noted in the last session, the professional fees for cross-connection contract within the water utility budget was reduced from $25,000 to $0. Again, since it's in the utility budget, there's no levy impact, but it's a significant change in the proposed staff budget. If I could make mention of one additional item that came up since this document was prepared, and that is the Lake Bluff Tennis Court, which was originally slated to be completed using bond proceeds in 2016, has been deferred to 2017. So staff has added a line item in the budget indicating that those reserves will be used in 2017 for that project, just so the encompassing of all the activities we expect to occur. That also has no levy impact because it's from bond proceeds. We've already received those funds with the 2016 debt offering. The net results of the staff adjustments.
Can I just ask one question? Items 22, 23, 24, the shared revenue, the expenditure restraint, transportation aids. These are hard numbers now?
They are.
They've come in and...
They are.
Okay. Thank you.
The impact to the proposed budget with these staff adjustments is indicated in the purple shaded lettering underneath line 32, tax levy savings due to staff adjustments of $27,722. So that reduces the proposed tax levy amount with the 2017 budget. Effectively, that in isolation reduces the percentage increase of village taxes from the proposed 2.25% to 2.01. You'll see that there's another total underneath that, which pulls in some numbers from the preceding page. And going back to that page, you'll see two numbers have been programmed in to the budget wrap-up items. Item number 2 and item number 4. Those issues were raised by the committee, so they were not staff initiated, which is why they're in that area. Although staff concurs with those observations and has just complicitly adjusted the budget accordingly, we believe that those were issues that didn't require any board direction to do so. We would have done them as staff adjustments if it would have been outside the context.
So you look at those as just corrections?
Those are just adjustments, yes.
Okay.
Initially, when the budget was put forward, commentary about expenditure restraint eligibility was that we were right on the line of being able to maintain our expenditure restraint eligibility. That's what is it? It's a $289,124 revenue source from the state for being compliant with those requirements. Two things have happened. Number one, the staff adjustments have come in, which has lowered the general fund expenditures, therefore giving us room underneath the cap that we were so very close to at the time, as well as today the League of Wisconsin Municipalities issued their preliminary estimates on the consumer price index figure that they expect to be used for expenditure restraint requirements, which came in 0.3% higher than staff was estimating, which also gave us another $30,000 of room underneath the expenditure restraint limits. With that in mind, staff does not foresee maintaining qualifications for expenditure restraint as being an issue for the matters currently being discussed. Should the board take actions that change that perspective, I will give the appropriate feedback at that time.
What's the limit? What's the cushion? It was 4,000 before these changes were made.
60,000.
I didn't understand the question. What?
About $60,000 of room now underneath the expenditure restraint limit with the adjusted proposed budget. So the real impact of that is the board would have to decide to raise expenditures or taxes in excess of that amount at this hearing to run into any concerns about being able to qualify for that.
How much?
About 60,000.
Okay.
Attached to these two numerical pages are the follow-up information the board has requested regarding code compliance issues, a 2-page memo from the planning department, a review of the debt service stabilization comparison between 5% and 4%, and then the source documents that would have supported the deferred capital projects that did not make it into the original proposed budgets. So those materials are on hand if you haven't reviewed them. They, in addition to the feedback items from the individual sessions to respond to the comments of the group, these items have also been included for your reference. So with that being said,
What's the budget, what's the tax rate? tax levy rate increase.
About 2.01%.
I thought the 6550 came off that you're saying.
2.01?
The 6850, I thought, came off that number.
No. Oh, well, that, with the wrap-up items included, it'll be 1.95-ish, or 9.2-ish.
Which wrap up?
From the first page, that's $6,850
Okay.
that are, I have classified under board wrap-up issues.
Okay.
So that does drop the rate. And I did try to put some informational material at the bottom of page 2 to give a couple of benchmarks for anyone who's looking to achieve a numeric number instead of making independent decisions, just strictly on an item-by-item basis, so that you can use that to help guide your decisions.
I'm sorry, Mark, I think there's a sentence I didn't hear at the end, of which I didn't hear the end. With the staff adjustments and updates on page 2, items 22 through 32, and that 34,000.
27.
27, excuse me, that 722 in savings, that brings us to the 2.01%
Correct.
increase. But if we, and it did, that does not.
If you accept the other 2 recommendations on page 1, it gives us down about
Okay, so that's my question.
1.9.
That doesn't, that 2.01 does not include page 1.
Great.
Correct.
Okay.
So when you say the savings needed to achieve less than a 2.0.
We're already 6,572 over that level. Because we're at 34,572 now.
Okay. Page 9 of the budget book also has kind of a cheat sheet of
Yeah.
how, what each percentage shift, what means to the tax bill rate on a $300,000 house.
And again, anecdotally, for every $1,000 is about 0.1%, or 1/100th
Because it's a $10 million.
of 1%. Yeah, because it's a 10 million-ish.
Right.
So, you know, as we process through this, I can certainly do some back-of-the-envelope calculations if you so want me to do so. So with that, I guess at your leisure to roll through the items that are under consideration for action, and I will take notes.
So are we actually taking action today, or are we taking action on the number?
We're giving instructions to staff to modify the proposed budget.
You're taking action today to modify the budget to go to,
Public hearing.
Public hearing,
to go to public hearing and to go to,
Because I think last year,
trust.
okay.
You
I
can
think
do
last
last
year
year.
it was,
You can-
it was a public hearing.
So what we can do now is we're hoping to give us a number to go to public hearing. At the public hearing, after hearing, you can make as many adjustments and amendments as you'd like.
Thank you.
This is just for, so that we have direction of what to put in the hearing notice tomorrow.
You got a
Because
couple.
we want as accurate as numbers for the hearing.
Just last question, sorry about procedure. If we don't have that number, we need Mark to calculate that number based on our suggestion that we're going to vote on, I assume. Then do we have to wait and just do that in a minute? We don't have the number tonight.
What we're looking for is line item changes, and the numbers will work out however they do. And then we'll have a final calculation, the budget will be redrafted, recirculated, and, you know, if that number, whatever the percentages are and the dollar amount associated with that is what will be going to public hearing. And then if the board chooses, our hope is that we will focus on major issues, not this level of discussion. And again, this is a culmination of a lot of line item things. There's not to say there's not a few major issues here, but it's a lot of, from a tax impact perspective, a lot of smaller adjustments. We just like to iron those out.
So you go down the line and you decide either by voting or consensus, whatever the chairman would like, to see if they stay or change or whatever for the, not for the hearing notice only.
So what I would like to go ahead. I'm sorry.
Are we giving you consensus direction, or are we making a motion, taking a vote, and voting on the changes?
It's on, based on the chair's.
We're going to be voting on
We're
it.
voting. Okay, good.
So what I'd like to recommend is that the chair of budget and finance just go through these and
Okay,
then we'll act on
all right.
Do you want questions and discussion ahead of time, or just as each
As we
item?
go down each
Okay.
item, I think we're gonna, and Mark has provided us the page of the item, so probably you could just go right there. He's asking for direction on the specific item. Under the village board budget, on page 44, there is, come forward. Professional education, there's $1,000 allocated in the proposed budget for professional education of the village board members. So we had
And
someone had
the
suggested
proposal
possibly.
for additional consideration was to add funding for 5 additional board members to attend the conference at $450 each, which would be to increase that by $2,250 to $3,250.
So on this supplement that we received, should line 1 say amount in your guys' budget, should it say 2?
I will update that based on your actions
Oh, okay.
right here.
Thank you.
I don't want to make any presumptions on
Yes,
that.
okay, now I understand.
it. So you're just repeating the preliminary budget and the revised budget, and you're going to change that as we go down the list.
I will make those changes as we go.
Thank you.
Any thoughts? I guess my thought is we haven't done this in the past, and I don't know that we really have to make the addition of this. In fact,
I would like to see more information. I don't, without more information on what the spending's been over a number of years and more rationale for the increase.
the spending's been almost nil.
So I
So, the spending's been for board members, me going to a few conferences, and maybe one time that Tammy and Ann went, and then I don't know what's going on with your being part of the league board of directors. Do they pay any of that, or do you have to pay?
Yeah, well, they'll only pay if it's over 200 miles away.
But they pay, but you don't have to pay conference fee though?
Correct.
Right. Okay. So that's been pretty minor. Yes.
I was one of the people that suggested this, or one of the trustees that made the suggestion, and I made it almost in conjunction with 2 other items. One was the village manager's professional education and in general professional education all around the village. And then the other was the pay for trustees, which I assume we're taking up at a different time. That was the direction of staff recommendation. So my concern is that we spend a lot of money on professional development in the village, and I think it's a benefit to the employees, because I do believe that everybody should grow in their profession, and it helps not only themselves, but it helps the organization. And so it's similar to the wellness program, it's an employee benefit, and it helps the organization grow. I also believe that board members can get elected without any knowledge of the programs that they're being asked to vote on. And so if we value professional education so much for our employees, I would think that board members who want the opportunity to go to one conference a year, or one out of state, one in state, or whatever is equal to what the department heads are getting, that I would like to see a fair and equitable treatment of board members who may have a different interest than past boards. So when we vote, we'll find out if anybody has that interest, but that really was the proposal. I
Okay.
believe-
So does
So I
somebody else have
actually
any comments?
proposed a higher amount, supplemental to the 450, but in general, if I could change my,
You can propose anything you like.
yeah, so I would like to know if we limited all professional development to one out-of-state conference and one in-state conference to department heads, what would that save us? And then if you threw in the same ability for the trustees, what would the total be? And I don't know how to get that number.
Well, that's beyond the scope of what I can present tonight.
Do you have a specific proposal for this line item? I mean, this board, irrespective of the other line items, this line item, what would you want this to be for the village board?
So you need a number tonight, is what you're saying?
Yep.
We do.
Okay, I had proposed in my email that, let's see, I just don't want to get it wrong.
You can change your mind.
And I can change my mind. Okay, good. I had, so I don't know what the department heads get per department. I don't know if it's 4 conferences or 5. But anyways, so I would have liked it to be equitable, but if I have to pick a number out of the air, I would say that $3,000 a trustee, or for 5 trustees. So 15.
I'm sorry, $3,000 times 5 or 3,000 total? I didn't
Oh,
understand.
3,000 times 5.
Okay. All right. So is that kind of a motion?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Wait, 1,000 is currently budgeted, correct? So if we
Oh,
wanted,
you're right.
if we
Yes.
wanted 3,000 total, it would be
Sorry.
adding 2,000.
Thank you.
Oh, not per,
No, sorry,
No.
I said that wrong.
I mean, I'll just add that I think it's a value, I agree that it is a value to have some opportunity for board members to have professional education opportunities.
I concur as well. We don't have our own staff. And of course, there's village staff, but unlike elected officials in other areas, Milwaukee, et cetera, who have staff members, all of what we have to do, all of the information that we have to gather, we have to get on our own. And that includes answering emails, it's constituent relations, research, everything. And professional development, I found invaluable in this position. So I would love to see my colleagues participate in a little bit more professional development as well, if they're able and interested.
okay.
I have a question. I'm not sure if I can do this, but I know the school board budgeted, I forget what it was, do you remember?
I don't.
Okay.
If we decide on a number after today, then I assume, working with Mark, then I assume we would make an amendment.
That would not be my preference. My preference would be to move forward based on decisions tonight.
But at the public hearing, you could ask for that at the public hearing.
Yeah.
So did you want to make a motion to add?
Change it from $1,000
$1,000?
to $3,000 was
Yeah.
what I heard.
I can make a motion to change it from 1,000 to 3,000.
Second.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I've attended the lead conference a couple of times, and it's been valuable. I do like opportunities for professional development, but I have gained a lot from the staff, and working with the staff and working with other board members in an informal way. So I do think that I haven't felt an impediment by not going to more things. I've enjoyed going to the national convenings that Trustee Bockhorst was shared with me, but those have been sponsored. So there are some low or no cost opportunities out there that she's very resourceful in finding, and I'd like to get better at finding those as well. So if tax rate were not an issue, of course I would. But if we are balancing, if there are some other things on the list that I feel that if they're going to be cut in favor of this, then I don't see that measuring that.
I guess one comment I'll make is, when we're talking about equitable, I don't think equitable is a concern on my part. It's much more important for staff because they're the ones that are probably most of the need professional development too.
Yeah, I feel more of a responsibility to provide that.
Any other comments? Seeing none? All in favor of the motion stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay,
Doesn't pass. Okay, go ahead.
next item is the village manager. Oh, that you've already That was just an
Correct. Staff stipulates that's a reasonable.
Okay, next item, item 3, is there was some discussion, which on the village manager's professional education line item, which is on page 54, the detail is on page 55, it's budgeted at $11,500. The budget encompasses training for beyond just the village manager and the assistant village manager. The top 2 items of those specific staff. The other ones are training for a broad range of employees.
Do you know who? I mean, like which other positions? Does it say it? I'm sorry.
A lot of it's in-house, like customer service training, that is an in-house training for all staff, not just, but it's in my budget because it makes sense. Employee engagement, something we're trying to do a little bit more of. There's a gentleman I want to have come in next year to do some training on employee engagement and start breaking us. So it's, again, it's for department heads, that's for all department heads, the $500. Other resources and technology related is mainly for Tyler and his human resource and his technology responsibilities. So that's really various seminars and conferences, all in state. Sustainability, that's in case someone from the sustainability committee wants to go something or do something, or for Tyler as the chairman or the liaison. The Elders one, economic development, there's 2 there. There's the WIDA conference, which I attend, so that one is a concert, and the Elders is the finance one that I'm encouraged to try to do. Management planning for lean, that's all about lean, and that's mainly in here or through WCTC. That's all day training. Every year in October, there is a, what's that, Center for
Center for Performance Excellence.
and then we have a lean training there every year for folks. So we are in the middle of our lean kickoff, November 1st this year and next year. So that is again for a lot of folks. The stuff that's really for, I would say the department heads are the 2 top ones, which is, again, the contract is not, it's within our agreement, our letter agreement. So those are the ones that are
Employment agreement.
employment agreements. And the other ones are miscellaneous, and none of those are out of state, just so you know. And most of them are local.
But there's professional education in other budgets.
Right, this is the one, of course there is. This is for general, big picture. The public works folks go to theirs. Planning people, who I don't think Erica's is in her budget this year. We have our Mark, he mentioned that in his, he goes to his GFOA, his credits, and both local and out of state. So, yes, you are correct. Every department head is, and the chief as well, is, let's just say, not required, but basically.
Mostly, yeah.
If they don't go to those, it's something I like to talk about. We do put it in each of their letter agreements, and we think that is part of the package, as you said. So I think it's very true to say that our department heads go to their international, usually which is a national conference, as well as state conference. So that is no doubt. And we encourage it.
Amanda had asked for a list of conferences mid-year, I think it was, from the village manager's office. And there seemed to be a lot more that you attended than what you just said. And I could be wrong, but I did review it. Did we update that in the list?
Okay, I haven't seen an update of that.
So I guess based on our.
Yeah, you're right. We go to the economic development, I just said.
Yeah.
The human resources one. Tyler and I went to that, not this year, but last year we both went to him because I want to introduce him to people. So, and I do go, Guy and I usually go to presidents and those precedents.
Yeah, and it's helpful, right?
I would say so, yeah. But I didn't go to Lee this year because I went to that one. So. You go to, I would say 5 a year.
Right.
You go to 5 a year?
Yes. Is my average, but
I would like to reduce that budget. And you're gonna ask me.
Which line item are we talking about?
Well, not so much even what line, what training don't you think should be supported for staff
I-
in
You
the
know,
details?
I think it's a little unfair to ask trustees to, we don't have a
We don't have
list of
any
every
information.
training, and I think it's a little unfair to ask us to, at that level of detail. I mean, I think it's reasonable to be, one state conference, in-state conference a year, and every other year travel out of state. I think that's a reasonable amount, given our financial limitations and the size of this village. Multiple, not to mention that going to multiple conferences takes time away from productive work time at the village. So I feel that we need a policy. Maybe it's not one in-state, out-of-state every other year, maybe it's some other amount, I don't know, but I think there should be, that we should have some kind of policy and that our expenditures in this matter can be reduced.
And when I proposed a $2,000 increase, I mean, some of the trustees think that's a lot for, professional development for the board. And we have other pressing concerns, like keeping some of our staff members, building our alleys. So using that same logic, if we could reduce this budget by half, then we've saved $6,250, because there are some pressing infrastructure needs and staff needs that we could use that money for.
I would not support that. I mean, like human resources training, technology training, there's great savings you can achieve and avoid doing things in compliance. The lean training, perfecting our processes, there's efficiencies to be gained there. I mean, if you're focused on these national conferences for the manager and the assistant manager, that's a separate issue, but cutting line staff training on day-to-day activities, I think it's not a way to go.
I'm not proposing line staff training or a training that anyone would need to maintain their accreditation, okay? But if we have more detail on the budget, we could go specifically, but, I think it's excessive, the amount of trainings.
Is there a proposed
I think
change?
I'll make a motion to reduce that number in half.
To reduce what number in half to what?
11,500 to reduce it by 55, 75, 50, I don't know, half of 11,500, it's 5,500,
57.
750.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion?
I just have a point. Part of the discussion we're having is, I don't think it's, part of the challenge we have here is saying, well, we didn't approve that, and so we've got to approve this. And that's the unfortunate thing of taking these things line item by line item. Because a budget is all about sacrifices. In order to do more, we've only got a finite amount of money. We want to do more over here. We've got to do less over here. So taking these things if we're going to continue to do these line item by line item, we've got to realize that we can't have that conversation. It's not fair to have a conversation about, we just voted that, so we ought to do this. The other thing is, and I don't disagree about with anybody's, and I should say, I don't have an issue with anybody's interest, any trustee's interest in things like taking a look at a policy about how we ought to manage our professional training in terms of national conferences and things, and setting up a more detailed policy. I don't think at this time this is the time to have that discussion. I think those are discussions we should start. I mean, we've been talking about this budget for a couple of months, and we've had many more months before that with our prior budget. I would hope that that some of these things that take a little bit more thought, whether it's the professional education for the village board or professional education line on budget for the village manager's budget, that we realize that, at least in my opinion, this is not something we ought to be talking about here from a policy standpoint at the tail end of the discussion. Those are the leading end of the discussion. And with that, I guess I can finally call the question.
Just to be fair, we have been asking about this policy for months, so we haven't gotten a lot of response because, you know, there were other pressing needs, but, so this is the time we actually are making the funding decision, and we're doing trade-offs because we have a tight budget. So if there are things that we want to see added, we're just trying to find things that we've been working on but have not come to fruition.
Call the question. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Next item.
The lot doors already staff is adjusted. Item 5 was the proposal to consider increasing poll worker pay. Currently, page 62.
Was there an increase, we might have discussed this, was there an increase in the last 2 years?
3 years?
I feel like
I think it was 3 years ago, but that's
Three.
my recollections, right?
A lot of them used to be volunteers. Or accountable, take them under minimum, which you can, so we went up to $2.
If I could interject, Mike.
Yeah.
This is one of the 2 items that's, I'm a color code guy, it's coded in amber. Again, it's perhaps some of the expectations of the entire process was lost when you didn't provide the feedback during the individual sessions. So based on your inquiries, these 2 items were 2 items that were added to the list, not to exclude anybody. In this case, poll worker pay is $8 an hour. If you want to increase it $1 an hour, it'll require a motion to increase the line item budget by $1,250, $2 an hour would be $2,500. So for context, that's the metric for your motion.
So are we having problems getting poll workers?
Always think. It's not a dollar issue, it's more of a time issue. People just did this, remember years ago, it was
So many
really
retired
more of a
people.
social, it was more of a social thing, and people are getting real busy, even folks who are past, you know, retirement age are real busy now than they were back in the day, so every community is having trouble getting poll workers. But money does not, according to, again, I don't know this, I got this from Congress, the money doesn't encourage it. Obviously, you can. $20 an hour, you may get one, but, you know, the few dollars that we could get, it's, most people do it because they want to do it, not because it's all about the law. They usually work 8-hour shifts, plus some work outside, so they make 20 hours most.
All right, this is mentioned. I don't know if we're allowed to lay down until we have a motion, but, so I guess my understanding is it says increasing poll workers' pay, and I would be interested in seeing, it. Like you said, it's not necessarily a dollar per hour, it's more of a length of time, and Sherry in the past, and I'm not sure if this is going on right now, had proposed looking at doing half-day shifts for people, because I think it's a 12-hour, pretty
6 to 2
onerous.
and 2 to
Oh,
close
so
it.
there are,
It is split, and some work longer, but those are the 2 main ones. But it's still, if you start at 2, for presidential, you get out there at 11 o'clock, you know. Right. So, I mean, it can be a 10-hour shift. But I think you're right. I think if you could get it down to 4 to 6 in a manageable, it's a good thing, just to give you more people.
right, which could be using the money then to publish or advertise for more poll workers or to look at different avenues.
Always wants more money for people.
It didn't have to be just poll workers pay, that's what the officer was saying.
Just for conversation, if you change that metric, you have to change the relationship between poll worker time and training time, because all poll workers have to be trained. So if you were to cut the shift in half, you'd have to double the training budget.
Because you have twice as many.
twice as many people need to be trained.
That's where the money is coming.
Just increase class sizes. Happens
So
all the time.
if
But
it
they
is,
get paid for their training.
It doesn't cost anything to train, it costs per hour. We pay it.
and I imagine Tanya or Sherry in the past looked at either perhaps incentivizing someone for a full day's work versus
I don't know if she did, that's a really good idea.
for an extra dollar an hour. I don't know what the amount would be.
So I think the purpose of putting extra dollars into the election, whatever line item it is, was to allow the election, Tanya and her staff to recruit more aggressively, provide them training hours, cutting the shifts in half, potentially pay more incentive pays if they want to stay for the day. So just, I know we always have trouble recruiting, and I think it's a great, it's a great service that they provide.
Then
So then what we're talking about is just putting, we're not in making a change to that line item, going as far as to direct how that increase
Right.
is spent.
correct.
It's going to be some combination of additional hours, more people, and more training,
Right, continue.
potentially.
I was gonna say to use at the discretion of
Yeah.
the village clerk, who is the one who deals with this.
What amount are you proposing?
Jesse got first, does that have some?
I'm looking at the pay, historical, presidential year, or 2014 is 24,000. Then the off year, which is 2017 is gonna be an off year, 2015 was $6,300. So the 2017 budget has $10,000, and I'm wondering if it's already in there. And, I mean, I know we bumped it up a bit. And it's definitely 2017 is a lot more than 2015.
Yeah, I really can't speak to the 2015 amounts, why those
Right.
seem abnormally low, although the 2018, the combined total is currently proposed at 10,000, and 2015, the actuals would have been just over 6. I don't know if the
And some of the
number of workers and the requirements that are now in place, have changed. I can't speak to why that is.
Are we, sorry, I was just wondering, are we looking at staff, poll worker and staff training, or is this including any maintenance or equipment costs, or capital costs?
We just stay up
Just staff?
in education.
What was the 2015?
Oh.
6,400.
Which is a non-presidential, and this time, this will be a non-presidential in 17, and we got 10,000.
That is proposed. They may have just been shorthanded, they couldn't have the troops and just double. I just don't have that information.
Well, there's the ID requirement down here that there wasn't in 15.
I think it's nice that the board is being considerate of this service and wanting to expand it, but since there is no proposal from the staff in terms of an actual need and indication, with just a perception that with an ongoing, just a blanket, it's difficult to get poll workers. I can't quantify that, and I don't feel comfortable making a budget change based on that. But I'm happy to have staff research it over the next year and make a proposal with more numbers.
Okay, anybody want to make a motion? If no motion is made, we just go on to the next item.
I won't make a motion, but I will say that I have heard, and we have not raised the pay for poll workers in 3 years. And at the time, it was a difficult ask, if I remember correctly, from Sherry, who was the village clerk at the time. But it was one that she said was very necessary. And I believe at the time it was only $0.25 per hour or 50 cents per hour that we raised it. We're still, if you look at the North Shore communities, we're right in the middle. And in addition to that, we've been struggling for a while, and even in the last spring election, we waited, if you voted on election day, the lines were, in the middle at 10 o'clock in the morning, 45 to an hour, for wait, and there wasn't really, there was a primary, presidential primary, but anyway, so just being able to address the needs, whether or not it's presidential, there seems to be in Wisconsin always something that's going on.
Okay. Is that moving to a motion or not?
I agree with Trustee McKay that without any recommendation from staff, it's difficult to just arbitrarily pull in our
All right, Mike?
All right, item 6, page 91. There was planning revenues, building permits. Mark, I think.
Right, at the budget workshop session, it was noted that the 2016 revenue estimates that were incorporated in the budget were based on a first draft from the planning department and were not, were subsequently updated. The question then became, they were updated because of anticipated revenues that were expected from projects that haven't yet occurred, and if because those numbers are being revised, that merited an increase in the 2017 budget numbers. We've looked and done a real thorough analysis between the planning department, Chris and myself, looked at our trends of what's generally considered background levels of activity, looked at known projects, and we don't believe that there's just cause to make any adjustments to those revenue numbers for 2017. The known projects are already factored into that list, just the primary building permit for the Sherman project should that break ground, and that is a one-time expenditure. We would not normally budget for that in any case. So that's
Questions or discussion?
follow-up feedback.
Okay. Moving on to 7, same page, code compliance discussion. Somebody.
I believe that Trustee Rosick brought this up, but I brought this up, I believe, last year also. I'll note that the citations issued for code compliance between 2014 and 2015 with the, now that we no longer have time of sale, code compliance. So we've issued 30% more citations for code compliance in a single year. Questions have been raised about apartments and keeping apartment buildings compliant for renters. But of the 248 code compliance citations issued, and this is from the Planning Department's annual report for 2015, only 23 out of 248 were multifamily. The majority are single-family dwellings. The people I have heard from, primarily, I believe all of us have heard from residents who have issues with some of the citations that were issued, issues with their issues. And I guess my problem with it is the people who have contacted me are either elderly or they're not keeping up their house because they don't have the money to keep up their house. So I have a little bit of an issue of us stepping up code compliance when we are primarily affecting either the seniors or lower income people in our community. The argument that code compliance is what has been driving increased projects and other permits pulled for improvements in our housing stock. If you look at the number of permits that have been pulled, they're pretty consistent. 2012 was about 450, went up in 14 to 477, and 15 we're back at about 450. I think if you look at what's really been happening in our housing stock and our housing market, we have had I know certainly in my neighborhood, and I think many others, a tremendous influx of young families. Our school-age population, our resident enrollment since like 2010 has gone up by 260 kids, which in a district of our size is absolutely astounding, okay? These families are moving in, and they're saying, hey, I want an updated kitchen, and I want a nicer bathroom, and I need to add a room, okay? That's what is driving the improvements to our housing stock and our housing value. I don't believe that code compliance has much, if any, impact on housing improvements and increased housing value. So my proposal is to reduce the FTE of this position to 0.5 for a savings of $45,100. And I'll make that motion.
What was the amount, please?
$45,100. Second.
We have motion and second, any discussion?
I support the full-time position. I think if there are residents that are struggling with paying for improvements related to code issues, that's another discussion we can take on as a community, but I don't think reducing the amount of staff time that we attribute to that activity is the way to go. I think it's a good investment in the community, and I've heard more appreciation for it than frustration with it, mostly because our staff that works with the community is so outstanding and easy to work with. Since I've been a resident, that department and the perception of the department has turned around at 180 degrees, and I'm very proud about that.
Trustee Rosick?
So I had recommended this after watching the trends in our quarterly planning reports for a while, and also hearing from constituents on a regular basis. My biggest concern is because code compliance at time of sale has gone away, I've been told from staff and the village manager, we have now the ability to be proactive in our code compliance, and I'm concerned for two reasons. I think we are being overly proactive and issuing citations for things that we don't really have an impact on our property values. I don't want to go into any details, but that's my one concern. So I'd like to see that ratcheted back. There is a tipping point. The other thing is that the CDA has not taken on any housing programs at this time to date. And I feel like if we're going to be so proactive in our code enforcement, then we should be simultaneously proactive in our funding or our programs that would allow people with lower incomes to comply. And I don't feel that's happened, and we've had a whole year, or at least since I've been here in April. And so until we are able to come together and create a program, a comprehensive program where we are doubling up on our code compliance and we're also offering some sort of assistance for people with lower incomes, I can't support a contribution for that.
I can understand that, but I don't think the answer is reducing the program. I think it's keep working in the direction. I like what you're proposing. And I don't think it's unusual for something not to occur within a year, especially when the state legislation is changing. We were about to implement some programs and then they became illegal. So with that changing landscape and all the other tasks that we put in the priority this year, I don't think it's unreasonable that we aren't there yet, but I don't see any reason why we can't keep going in that direction. I think it's a great direction to go. But I don't think the answer is
Trustee
reducing.
Zovic?
I agree that perhaps the way we conduct and how we prioritize or how zealous we are in code compliance might have to be looked at. I think that's something that we ought to do outside of our budget. And I don't think the way to have that discussion is to say, let's cut this in half and then have a discussion about how to implement it for a number of reasons. Largely, we've got a program that, yes, there are complaints, but by and large is working. I think those of us that have been here for a long time have seen the difference in our code and inspection program overall from a homeowners and neighbors perspective. And I would hate to think that taking a step back and risking losing staff because of a short-term budget cut, I don't think that's a wise move. I think it is a smart thing to say, let's have that discussion about, geez, is it disproportionate? Is it unfair? How ought we conduct those assessments? But I don't want to, and I don't think it's appropriate to do the budget cut. I think they are doing a great job. I think, yes, we at the school, if we look at the demographics of our community, we're not much denser than we used to be, and yes, we do have 200 more students than we did some years ago. We're still we're still 300 students short of where we were a decade before that, all of which can't be described with simply changing state demographics. I think part of the reason that we have got people moving in is because it remains an attractive place to live, because the housing stock is kept up, the neighborhoods look attractive, and this is a place not only that is close to all these amenities and has these great schools, but it has great neighborhoods. And part of that is because we do have code compliance. And I want to continue, and I do not support any cuts to the budget at this time. Trustee Mentor?
I just want to reiterate that the number of citations were up in 30%. So this is not like a status quo of what the project is doing. This is not stepping back. We would cut code compliance, we would go back to what our levels had been before when we had time of sale compliance. So I want to emphasize that there has been an increase in acceleration, an additional focus on code compliance, and what we are saying is maybe we need to take it back to where it was before.
There were some things regarding that Trustee Mente had regarding the annual reports and quarterly reports, and I think, Erica's here. I'd be interested to hear what, if we might, Mr. President, comments from staff. Sure.
There are so many statements made tonight that I would love to react to. A lot of policy, a lot of facts that the details aren't really given into them, so I might think twice before I put a number in there with fully giving caveats to each one. As far as citations, I hope I don't provide in my updates all the time as far as how many of the same property owners. Sometimes we deliberately go after a particular commercial property owner and do a citation a week to entice them to get moving on something that they've ignored us for a year or more. That's where the higher numbers come from, is because last year we did have more properties that we were focusing on to incite to get going with this, because they were yes, commercial. So I have to look at, you're saying 30% increase at single family. I have to look at the individual tickets to see if that's true or not, and Tim, you can certainly speak to that. But the notion that the exterior of a property does not have an impact to the vibrancy of a neighborhood is incomprehensible to me. If I was going to look at a home and I look and I see weeds a foot tall, junk all over, lawnmowers, whatever, tinkering in the backyard, I'm not moving in that neighborhood. I am not, and I'll think twice if that's the community I'm going to move into. The effort that Tim Peck, this is our code compliance inspector if you haven't met him, and is part on to the building inspectors. I don't think you understand that when someone takes a permit out, and this is someone who's, the applicant wants to do the work to improve the house, right? The building inspectors, for the most part, go in and do a final inspection, they're done. When someone gets an enforcement letter, they ignore it most of the time. It's very rare that all of a sudden in 30 days, the 2 items on the inspection, the enforcement order, are completed. It is the time that Tim spends with each property owner is so significant. You cannot show that on paper, but I will work harder to do that. Policies. I'm going to share you our policies because he doesn't go after properties for one thing. He goes for major things first, and since he's on the property, he's going to look for those more minor things too. The CDA does have loan programs. We have housing programs. We've talked about grants, we talked about need. He is a huge resource to applicants. When they say, I don't have money, He has copies of the Milwaukee County Home Repair Program brochure in his car all the time and hands them out. Our main focus is compliance. We're not punitive. We work with people. We had years, 5 years on some people that were slowly getting compliance. You know, the citations are a last resort, so are the re-inspection fees. To put down, I have to add this one thing, to put it down to a half-time co-compliance inspector, first of all, you're going to lose the professional. You're going to get seasonal helpers that don't understand the codes. You're going to lose consistency in everything about interpreting the codes, interpreting the policies. And this is not just a 3-month-a-year job. He has no time for 8-9 months, and it's called catch-up in the interim. And I gave you, Tim and I quick threw this together today, just for simple images. They're all exterior, they're not interior. I should have put more junk in yards, I should have put more weeds, garbage, because no one wants to look at that. There's some property owners here that helped get the program going into this dedicated position back in 2008. That if you asked for them, they would gladly speak to the importance of it. And the pre-sale program is gone. 35 years we had that program. It's gone. What tools do we have? We have dedicated property enforcement efforts that a board of building inspector cannot ever be proactive. And if they do have time to take a complaint, it better be life safety or it will be put on the back burner until there is time. Sorry, I'm rambling, but I certainly have more facts and I will be sharing more information.
Trustee Rosie?
I just want to be clear that their code enforcement is not a bad thing. I mean, I agree that there are reasons for code enforcement, and all of the ones that you stated, I would agree with 100%. I'm not talking about those. We've stepped up code enforcement to an extreme where there's cracks in storm windows on the side of a house. So I just am saying that we must have the time for the smaller things, and that seems excessive. So I would love to focus on only the bigger issues as you have stated.
Trustee McKay?
I was actually thinking, Trustee Menta said that we've all had complaints. I actually have to say that I've never had anyone complain about the program, except for Trustee Rozek, who had a crack in her storm window. I don't know if you were talking about your experience or if that's just a coincidence, but, and I remember my reaction saying, I'm not a code expert, but it kind of makes sense to me, and if I let something go on my house like that and it led to something else, it then makes it, difficult. And so we just had a disagreement over that. I would say I've actually even had the opposite effect where I've had more than one resident talk about how the department has been responsive and very helpful in dealing with a vacant property, where a property that no one lives in it and it's within the family, and so they're trying to take care of it long distance. And I've looked into it, and you guys have been very responsive, and that even kind of goes above and beyond, the kind of scenarios that we're thinking about here. So again, I'll just say, I just want to be clear that I actually haven't had any complaints about the program.
And I was involved when it was first set up, and there was a lot of time spent designing the program for customer service. What are you really after focusing on? What really you're trying to do is keep maintaining the properties. And I keep driving through Milwaukee, and we were heading that way. Stuff was deteriorating, and we really have turned it around in the last 5 years or so. And it's because of the code compliance and people. There's abandoned houses in my neighborhood, and they eventually, at least the grass gets mowed when it's 1.5 to 2 feet high. The shutters falling off the building. Our property availabilities can quickly go down. We're right next to Milwaukee, and they're struggling, near the university and stuff, and I think we have to keep at it. We need to maintain and protect the value of our houses and stock in this village, so we can attract people.
Call the question?
There's no,
We do have a motion.
Yeah.
we do have a motion
in a second. 45-1.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
takes us to item 8.
Other financing uses on page 121. This is the debt service stabilization. I'm going to have Mark speak to this.
Sure. During our budget presentation, one of the things that's unique to this budget was the introduction of using general fund reserves to try to manage the rate at which the tax levy for debt service increases over the next several years as it kind of goes through a hump. And we've covered all that in the long-range planning processes as well. The question then was posed, well, if you're proposing to stabilize it at a 5% increase over time, what about a 4%? Would that be better? The document attached to this packet on page 5 then was our feedback to that question of what would it mean to try to stabilize the increase of debt service tax levy at 5% for a period of time and versus 4% over a period of time. And it would be staff's conclusion that stabilizing at 4% is not sustainable with the general fund reserves in excess of 30% that's currently available. But the numerics are there. It's in the general sense, it's 1.7 million versus 3.1 million dollars for the next 10 years to maintain that stabilization effort. Again, this is part of the broader long-range plan for managed, controlled increases of the tax rate and to avoid these big up and down movements. Certainly, staff wants to acknowledge that we hope we have some future surpluses as a result of operations in the future years, but trying to achieve, and I'll just, I don't have the number in front of me, but we're a little in excess of $1 million right now from the 30% benchmark policy the board has set for minimum general fund reserves. With additional bond issues, maybe some additional premiums, maybe some additional positive budgetary outcomes over the next 5 to 6 years. But we do believe that a 5% stabilization is sustainable, but the levels of support that we needed to stabilize that at 4%, we cannot concur with that. So that's really for your discussion. If you wanted to propose an alternative to the budgeted amounts, these are the facts behind the numbers, I guess.
I would recommend keep it at the staff recommendation of 5%. And we revisit it each year as we go forward. It's a wise move, which is 5% is a good level.
We can either do that as a motion, or we can just keep moving on.
All right. Item number 9, capital projects, 138.
You want me to touch on this?
Sure.
At the time the budget was prepared, staff anticipated that the funds allotted to the Wilson Drive, I don't want to call it by an unofficial name, but the group studying that corridor would not have been fully spent in 2016. Therefore, we inserted a provision here to carry forward reserves from 2016 to 2017 with the expectation that those funds would still be needed. And in the interim, the board did forward a proposal to spend the rest of those funds that they had available in 2016 on, was it R.A. Smith, MSA efforts. So that need is no longer required. Now, the budget was designed that this would come from capital reserve. So there's no budget levy impact to that decision whether to continue to fund this from reserves or not. The question becomes, do we envision that that group is going to need additional funding in 2017, and if so, what amount would that be, so again, that the funds are designated for that purpose? I don't have the answer to that question. I don't know if anybody's more intimately familiar with that than I am. But it's
I'll
just,
say from the steering committee standpoint, and David might chime in, there's been discussions about potential interest in doing other things, but there is no, at this time, no identified and agreed to need for additional professional services or supplies, equipment, or anything beyond the engagement that we currently have with the United States.
well, if I may suggest then
I mean, so they're coming back with some alternatives, and we talked about another public meeting to review what MSA comes back with and get a further round of public input, which would be in January. And I think that the cost for postcards, I mean, I don't see a reason to advertise that any less than we did our June public meeting. Erica, I know, believes that we can, I guess, just post it on the website and leave it at that. I don't feel that's sufficient in terms of the mission of the steering committee for public involvement and true public engagement in the process. So I would think between postcards and the other things we did, I think it was at least $3,000.
No, I think you should.
I thought there was some.
Leave what in, I'm sorry, the 10,000?
Well, leave whatever, I don't think you should take it away.
Don't spend it, it doesn't matter, so if we leave it in as 10, so we're talking about no change.
there would be no harm in doing that again.
I think you
Can we just leave it on as is?
At your discretion, it's just an inconsistency.
I also should point out that the cost, I think it was $2,500 roughly for My Sidewalk Plus. Again, Erica recommended that come out of the Wilson Drive budget, which it did last year, and it has not been used in any way, shape, or form for Wilson Drive. So I just throw that out there as a...
Okay, so no change then.
No change. Thank you.
Line 10, there was a suggestion to fund the master plan review consultant.
Yes, I had asked for some funds. I believe that in, I don't know the years, this is dates me, but we developed a master plan and a vision in 2025. There's a couple of issues that, for our central business district, that I would hope we could get some professional help with developing some strategies and holding public involvement meetings for implementing our master plan. One of them would be making sure that our zoning code is consistent with the policies that were adopted by the board. In other municipalities, we did this. That was the logical next step of the master planning effort. So I think that would be beneficial, and I can just give a few examples, but a professional could come in and look at our parking regulations, tell us some suggestions on, for the central business corridor and the surrounding neighborhoods, not Navy University, this is all, central business district is Oakland and Capitol, and then some of the neighborhoods that surround that district. And just telling us ways in which we can, different policies we can do to implement our plan that might increase our revenue stream for parking and or create more equitable zoning policies in that department. And also looking at any other inconsistencies between the master plan and the zoning code, dealing with other issues like discount stores or anything else. I have not had time to do that, but just giving us some professional advice on parking and if there are any recommendations for changes for that, and as well as for just sheer implementation of our master plan and our vision.
If I may,
Yes.
the CDA has an implementation plan in the back, so I mean, and there are several things, including what you're saying, not about the parking.
It's not about zoning code or?
No, not about the parking, not about the parking stuff. I really think it's all necessary. I think we have professional staff in the house, and I'd like to figure out what we can do in-house and what, maybe we do with some professional help. But I really think the CDA, because it is in their implementation strategy for the master plan, there is a list of who does what. I think we should review that, and I think it's a great idea. I just think we may be able to do a lot of it in-house, it's not that difficult, and we've already started, so I don't want to go down two different paths where our planning folks are going down this path and we have another one. So I think defining that a little better is all I'm asking for. I just, put a number in the budget's fine, I think we have to think about the scope and all of that. I'm excited about this, I just,
Yep, and I've been
just
told, there's, because I'm public safety chair, and I've been told we will be looking at parking,
well,
2017. So I just want to make sure that we have some outside help as board members as well. So when we have to attend these town hall meetings, I don't want to be the one in front of it. I want some professional help beyond just our own local staff. And not that our staff can't handle it.
we've done it in the past quite well, just so you know. We've done every parking out of professional since 2006, very successfully. So I don't think we're incompetent, I think we're very competent to do
I'm
it.
saying that.
I think if we need some cover, I agree. Cover being an outside consultant to help us through the difficult, that's fine. There could be some, but I just think you need to define how we want to, what's needed to be outside and what we can do in-house and how that works. That's what I'm saying.
If without the line item, can we take it from capital reserves like Wilson Drive did?
Well, I think you have two things. Parking, Mark's got all the cash, I think for parking, no, I mean, you know where it's at. Parking does have some surplus left, but I think if it's a parking study, that can affect that, there could be funds from parking. And some of that. From the, I think CDA, some of their stuff, I think there can be something from the CDA with some of their planning assessments, as that's part of the transfers, as well as from TIF 1, 4, and 5. So, and I think from capital reserves as well. So I think we can put a plan together, and I'm very excited about that. I'm not saying, I just think we will do that. I'd like kind of the CDA and or to be a lead, or community and business relations to be a lead, or
Or it could be a
public safety.
collaboration.
It could be a committee of things. I think it's a great idea. I think we
As long
can
as
figure
we're
out
not
how to
voting
fund
for it.
it
That's fine.
without budget. Is all I'm-
Can I ask, are we just considering the central business district? Because I would love to have some parking advice on this moving the residential congested area, because I see what's proposed to do north of Capitol is just shoving the problem off farther onto other parts of the village, kind of like the Halloween, closing the streets on Halloween. So I think that's another important parking issue. If we're going to start changing that it would be great to have some consulting assistance on that, and that's residential, it's not central business.
Right, it's just around here, it's around.
Yeah.
Fine. Give it for
Okay, move on.
So we're not funding it? I don't understand.
Unless, you want to make a motion?
Did I hear you, Chris, say develop the scope, and then we will
Find it some
fund
way.
it through those
I
various
think parking,
mechanisms?
CDA, and reserves are three places that I think we can do that. I don't think it's going to be 50,000. I think it's probably going to be about 10 to 20. Is my gut. Depends on how
Like a
deep you
national
go.
firm, if it's not in.
Well, yeah, national firm, they don't do anything for under 50%. I'm not sure, but I don't know.
There's no
if we need
indication
that.
you would need, I think that's premature to say that you would need an additional firm. Right. You're just asking. Oh,
Walker's parking is in Indianapolis, and they've done one back in 2000. They're really good.
Right, staff, I mean, our planning staff has been pretty focused on Wilson Drive and some other issues this year. And I know that's one thing the planning commission wants to get back to, because they've had that issue come up a number of times. And with the shift in the chief, that's also sidetracked parking, so we need to get back to parking. And in the past, we brought in consultants when needed to, like, to do specific projects or to do counts. And I'd want the scope defined beyond our own in-house professionals.
As long as there's another funding source, and that's what I'm hearing, because I just don't want to go down that road and need or desire to have a consultant and be told you have to wait till the budget of 2018, so. I'm fine if
I agree, especially since I've heard,
$50,000.
oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Like lots of people mentioned, oh, let's get a parking study before, you know, including discussions that we as a board have had on things like parklets and bike rails and other things. So, and the new restaurants or the new camp location here, you know, so the parking comes up in every discussion, not just when it's about parking specifically. So I agree. I mean, if we are gonna take this seriously, we have to have some money in order to discuss it. Maybe this line item is funding the master plan view isn't exactly parking, but.
You made a suggestion, sorry, as a suggestion, I think just to put it on record, I think maybe, obviously, if the board wants to add more money, they could put 5 or 10,000 in the capital fund, and then parlay that with the other funds, and that might, at least you have made a policy decision to go forward, so that would be helpful.
Okay, then I would make a motion to reserve or budget $10,000 out of
I would recommend property taxes.
property taxes to partially fund
Which means levy. Which means levy, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
to partially fund an overall parking study for the village of Shorewood.
second.
Call the question.
So what's $10,000 do to us?
It's,
Point one, right?
Point one, yeah.
Yeah.
Call the question?
well,
Any other
what's the,
discussion?
if we don't put it in the budget, what's the risk? Because, well, what?
I think what village manager said is by putting it in the budget, it highlights it enough to make sure that we look at it.
Little placeholder.
Well, in my training, and maybe you can verify this, but a budget is a policy document. That's what a budget is, that's the definition of it. And so by putting in a placeholder, you're making policy for the following year. So,
But I guess from this discussion tonight, I've heard that it could be funded from other sources, and we're not sure of the scope yet.
but we're like the Wilson Drive one,
Right,
and it
doesn't
would just
even
fall to the
impact.
bottom line, right?
Well, I guess just because there are so many things that are sort of on the line.
I'd like to offer, well, normally I don't do this, but I'd like to offer an amendment to that, to reduce it to $5,000, just so we don't have a big thing, it still gives the policy.
I would second that.
Is there a second for that?
I would second that.
Yes.
This is unlike the Wilson Drive budget item in that this is a tax levy item and not a capital reserve.
Yeah, that's
So this has tax levy.
Would you have the reserve?
No, the motion was based on Mark's recommendation.
Well,
I can amend the
Certainly
motion.
change the
I mean, that was
motion
just based on
again.
the finance director's recommendation.
You You've heard me state my reservations about depleting capital reserves beyond certain levels. My belief is not to deplete capital reserves anymore would be prudent. However, there are capital reserves at that level, should that be the board's decision.
I could
General fund
Could we
reserves.
do an amendment?
I would amend it.
We'll amend it.
Can we fund it from general fund reserves?
As a one-time project, I think that would be appropriate.
So that's a.
So that's not taxed.
Well, you know, that can just be not a motion if you want.
How about we all-
And that can be a consensus?
I'd like to make a voting, right?
But we still have the amendment.
I-
Well, the
You're missing
amendment was
official
to
minutes.
reduce it.
The clerk is in me,
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, I guess the amendment was to reduce, but does everything else stay the same, that it was coming from tax levy?
Or you could change your amendment. right?
Yeah, do a change order.
The easiest thing would be to everyone withdraw their motions in a second, and then for you to restate in the
That
motion.
sounds fine to me. Do you want me to are you okay with that?
I withdraw mine.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to reserve budget $5,000 from general fund reserves for a parking study for the village of Shorewood.
How about to apply towards a parking?
Oh,
parking plan.
yeah, apply
Parking-
towards the cost
parking.
of
Right.
parking to, yes.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor of the motion as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Passes. Go to the next item, which is, where are we?
Yeah. Boardroom chairs. The budget on page 141 has $6,000 for these chairs to replace them.
If you would just give me some phone books that I can sit on.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you over the squeaking, I'm sure.
Is there, I have a question about that, or do we need a motion on the floor? Oh, okay. Is there a reason that we have to purchase, I know from government, sometimes you have to order from certain suppliers. Is there a reason that we have to order $600 chairs, or can we put a lower amount if the desire of the board is to replace the chairs?
It's your chairs, you can put $100 chairs in.
Okay, I just
These-
don't know, because some.
No,
What was the price, Chris, what was the price on these chairs? About
Those are 180 apiece.
180?
Okay, but is it because of where we buy them?
No, we get a government price too if we want, you know. other-
We did look at appropriate style chairs and they range from $550 to $700.
So they're not the full air-ons, which would be.
I mean, wouldn't just a regular $100 chair be better than what we have?
I don't think.
Aye.
You can bring our own
I
folding
mean, these are
chairs.
probably 1,000 right now, these are with the wood and all that stuff, I mean.
Could we?
Your young body is probably in much better shape than my older body, but my back would not appreciate a $100 chair, I'll just tell you that.
They're expensive. And they're not top of the line. We've got reasonable quality, appropriate for the setting. And they're not leather chairs, they're not,
Good.
they're durable, comfortable, and again, somewhat comparable. And I bring two choices to you.
How much will we get if we sold them, do we know?
These?
Nothing. Why? Yeah.
I'd make a motion to remove the proposed 6,000,
Second?
To remove it,
to remove it
You keep the chairs?
and put the money back and reduce them a little.
Put it where?
Put it in, just reduce our levy.
Tax levy, or put into alleys or roads or into a program?
We don't dare do that, right? Are we gonna-
No, I just reduce the chairs.
I'd rather have some, be able to go to a conference than in a chair,
Me
frankly.
too. That's what we all said in prior discussion.
Was there a second?
Is there a second?
Yeah, there's a second, yeah.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Sorry, the motion is to remove this?
Can I make an amendment?
Sure.
I'd like to make a motion to remove the money from this line item and to put 2,000 of it back into the board's professional development.
Second.
Any discussion? We'll vote on the amendment first. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yay.
Yay.
I think it just passed 4-3. Okay,
Okay,
then we go to
did you
the,
get that, Mark? 3,000.
No, this was the amendment, I think, right? Or was that the motion?
that was the amendment.
Can do.
To the original motion, all in favor of it, say aye.
The original motion?
Wait, with the amendment?
Well, the amendment's
Pass
passed.
the
right?
amendment.
You-
So,
Oh,
So now we're
No.
just voting on
You voted to approve the amendment, so now the new motion has the amendment included that you have to vote on.
So
So you have to now vote on the new motion with the amendment
we're
included.
now voting on the amended
So
motion.
the
Correct.
amendment is to remove 4,000, because it was 6,000, we moved 2 to, so that's 4,000.
Correct.
My understanding was the motion was to eliminate the boardroom chairs, but increase to 3,000 professional education. Is that what you?
That was 2,000.
Additional
From one to
2,000. It's at one,
Total of
3,000.
3,000.
So it's a net $4,000 savings on our tax levy.
Right.
We still have to vote on
I believe you still have to vote on that, yeah.
I don't understand what we're voting on.
We're voting right now
To do that.
to,
That's the amended motion as I understood.
the
it.
amended motion is to,
eliminate the chairs and then
Eliminate
also
the
you can put 2,000 of the savings in the board training to increase
Oh,
that
that
to
hasn't
3,000.
passed,
It's all combined in one.
So all that passed was the ability to vote on this,
Correct.
Okay.
Yep,
the privilege.
that's perfect, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Okay,
call the question, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Passes.
Right, no. Nay.
Okay, so it's 6-1. Okay.
Next, item 12, marketing fund, page 177. Consider tax support amount of $45,000.
Which was that one?
177.
Go ahead.
So, trustee Avento probably wants to talk more on this, so I'll be really brief, but it's my understanding from conversations that we are heading towards a direction per the recommendation of staff that we might be offloading our events management. This still has to go to the marketing committee this week. Is that something?
There's hoping, yes.
Okay, so the village is hoping to move in the direction of getting out of the event business. We are fundraising, right, fundraising for events.
More in the sponsorship.
More in the
Again, I don't know if we're
Which
going
takes,
to get there, but that's where the direction.
which took a lot of time and coordination. And so there is I don't know, because I don't have the breakdown, but maybe Mark, you can point it out for me, that there is a line item that you've identified for coordination purposes of our marketing efforts, and that we have a consultant that currently did it for us last year, and so you said it was 12,000?
Page 178.
Is 178?
Is that the 12,000 number for all project management? How much of that would pertain to fundraising?
I don't know, I can't.
I mean, I've been asking for this number for a
No,
while.
I mean, I didn't, well, no, you asked how much of it would be for administration is what. For,
Coordination?
yeah, you asked, the question I had gotten before is how much of our marketing budget is for coordination? And the number's 12,000.
Coordination and administration, you're right.
And so I never put together how much of that is related to fundraising, part of that or any of that, but I think 25%, I don't know.
Okay, so in addition to just the events, there's also the capability that we've grown and have an in-house person, and I think the school district does too. So my thought is if we could eliminate the contract for the coordination purpose which seems to be like 12,000 number, that would reduce our tax levy.
Yeah, I talked to James later today about this, just to be clear, and, you know, hindsight, and what they realized is for next year, we do need to have the breakdown of those numbers and hours more clearly, and the marketing advisory committee needs to go over those, and so that's a recommendation for next year. In the project management, in that fee, and in the coordination, there is execution with that, so if you reduce it, we will lose some capacity to execute activities that fall under that. And she said, you know, I can't, because we don't have that breakdown, we can't say for sure, but we should just be clear that coordination isn't just like writing reports or documenting, or that we really, it is execution of tactics and events and collateral and things like that. So we haven't isolated what's associated with events. You probably can find what hours are for sponsorship, you know, fundraising, and that would be easier to isolate. And I think everybody agrees that, you know, we didn't see the savings, you know, so there's definitely, we want to look at different ways of doing it. But I just wanted to be clear that I had been thinking about coordination as a lot more, that we could live without it, but we would lose some capacity for execution. And that's just to be realistic as far as how much could come in-house. But I do think that the group is committed to, the leadership group and staff is very committed to doing this, you know, offering the program next year in the most efficient way possible, so that if there are savings to be realized, it's in everybody's best interest to find those sooner rather than later. So I think there's agreement there. As far as an exact number and what we would be losing, we definitely don't have that information right now.
Mr. President, fellow board members, my sincere apologies. I am double booked on civic engagements this evening, and I'm late for my double booking. So I need to excuse myself at this point. My apologies, particularly to staff.
The second time that you've done that during work.
Trustee Rosick.
So I guess I want to just state it clearly. I think we spend, I was hoping for some savings from our consolidated efforts. I think we spend, in conjunction with our other agencies as a whole, if you took all the costs, you know, $450,000 a year on marketing. So,
Oh, my God.
Right. No, it's not just us. I'm talking.
No, but I'm saying the communication, I mean, the school's budget is development. I'm not arguing, I'm just saying they have a development director, so.
That's my assumption,
If
and I
that's
don't have
marketing.
any, I've asked for, you know, that possible, I haven't received yet, so. Anyways, it's a high number, and I do fundamentally believe that you know, building of our infrastructure is more important. And if we could transfer some of our property tax dollars from marketing to infrastructure improvements, I want to make that motion.
I just want to say too, I find it incredible that we sat for over 2 hours. We spent probably as much time on marketing as we did on every other village department, and yet we were not provided with basic budgetary breakdowns such as administration and events and various other things. I just feel that, you know, just that expenditure of my time, I think was in terms of what we got from actual factual information. I would definitely support a reduction of 12,000. In fact, would support a reduction, even further reduction. I feel that the events that we put on and the support for the events is really important. I want to continue to support for the 4th of July, the concerts, the bike race, etc. We have in-house staff, as Allison mentioned, at both the village and the school district, and I see primarily marketing as what, you know, back in the day was what the Chamber of Commerce did. Like the Chamber of Commerce advertised, this is how great Shorewood is, come shop in Shorewood, come do things for Shorewood. I don't see the value of it. I could see splitting the cost of events with the bid, and the rest of it to me is boosterism, and in comparison with the other functions that we are being asked to fund, I just don't see the value of it. So I'll second your motion, and I would support an even further rejection, but for now, I'll just second your motion.
So marketing Shorewood, Allison, just want to give this.
Reduction of 12,000 in property tax levy from the marketing of Shorewood budget.
And what line items, expense line items would those come out?
General professional fees, I believe, would be the offset to that loss of revenue.
52,100.
Is that the consultant then?
Further discussion? I just want to question trustee McKay on your
Yeah.
conversation with Ms. Slater. What would be her reaction to this? And I don't want to put you on the spot.
I think the feeling is, it's unfortunate that it's unfortunate that we don't know how much execution dollars we need to maintain the presence that we have with media and collateral and communications. But unfortunately, that is the way it is. She's been, Janet's been through enough budgeting exercises in her professional career to know that when, whatever your budget is, you make it work and you adjust it and you reprioritize. So, unfortunately, it is what it is and we are where we're at. And, I think all of us want to fund all the responsibilities that we have. This budget for this amount of money for marketing has been, what I can say is that it has been handled with a high level of professionalism and a commitment to savings and a commitment to leveraging what we have. And can it be done better? Yes. And I think if it is going to be done better, we would gladly offer up the savings and transfer that to, infrastructure, whatever. I don't think that's a debate. I think it's just what's hard to know is putting a number on it, what that means. But
So if we take 12,000 out of it, where's it going to come from?
in
I
the
assume it's going to be
program,
some salary?
it's going to be a reduction in hours of professional services, which translates to execution of the, how we've been doing events. Now, can we look for a cheaper way to manage events? We definitely can and we want to. Everybody agrees that we want to. We just don't know what's in the community yet, what's available. That's the
Can I
question.
just point out that this was a sole source contract. If you want, and trustee Rosick and I have been asking for a while now why this contract has never been bid out. We could probably save $12,000 on just bidding it out.
One of the things that we wanted to look at in marketing is like we do with Plein Air, in that we really just hire a private contractor to do it. Or in some cases, we would just go, okay, here's $5,000, 4th of July committee, you run with it. So, using our money and not having a coordination, just have a volunteer group or a group that's already has the infrastructure to do it would be terrific. And that way we don't have to pay those coordination fees. That was kind of the direction. I don't know how easy that is, don't get me wrong. It's not an easy thing to do because there's not a lot of people out there willing. But like Plein Air, Jenny did that. We gave her the money, it was boom, gone. Great,
And I think
So that's what we'd like to do, to reduce.
And typically you get to 1 or 2 years out of that and then
then it
falls
burns out.
apart.
Yeah, exactly.
Sustainability's tough.
Right.
on those.
And that's-
Disintegrates.
But it's been that way kind of not every year, but I mean, it's been hard at one level or another.
Sure.
But I think that the community's really, what I've heard from people is they're really committed to it and everybody agrees that they want to find a way to keep these events going and they want to save the volunteers. I think with, you know, if you want to have paid advertising and, you know, obviously, well, we're not recommending. I guess what I would recommend is if we want to reduce the budget
Right.
in the general marketing fund by $12,000 and then decide, and then the marketing leadership and marketing advisory committee works with that budget, that's what Janet recommended, that you wouldn't necessarily. Yeah, I mean, to look at sort of like a global reduction, but to target it at one line item may really set us up for an ineffective program. So that's what I would recommend.
Do you want me to amend my motion?
Start over.
Okay.
Well, could I interject this one, a practical matter? I duck when I hear the words marketing, and Chris really just handles the management of that whole consortium of partners and the marketing group. From a practical matter, I mean, we have to, if we're gonna do a revenue, we have to do an expenditure. However, when the final terms are brought to the board, that's really what the board approves for that contract. So that's really what's in force governing that performance of those services. So
We could see
I-
5 different contracts.
Right.
So I don't see an inconsistency necessarily with saying that from a budgetary perspective, we tap one line item.
Okay.
But then when the agreements are brought to the board is approving those in supplement to the budget. And I don't see a problem budgetarily from just going with whatever the board approves.
So you're more confident
So I wouldn't
pinpointing it.
suggest amending the motion, I just suggest that when the board approves those agreements, it's a supplemental approval to the budget, and any variances that may resolve from that, it has tacit board.
Do we need
It has
to memorialize?
explicit board
Do we
approval.
need to memorialize this somehow? So
Footnote in on the, like an asterisk or double asterisk in that allocated, you know, the leadership committee will present a fine allocation.
From my
You're right,
perspective,
line.
for budgetary compliance, it's no different than saying, we think we need $6,000 for boardroom chairs. Once the selection's made, we realize we need 7,500 or 5,500. You know, it's, once the board approves that purchase, then based on that decision, it's a supplement to the budget and it doesn't create any budgetary conflict. So, I just from managing the budget, I would say the existing motion is fine.
and the existing motion is taken in from project management?
From professional fees.
They wipe out, there's 4 lines on.
Yeah, there's 4 lines, 4 sublines.
It's not on, what all you have to do is 52,100 is the comprehensive line. So
Yeah, this is a master line, not the detail.
it would go from 34 to 22, that number.
Right.
On page 177, the first expenditure line item.
Yeah,
The marketing committee would go back and figure out how to reallocate all.
Exactly.
so you could enter a negative line under media relations, an adjusting line that would be determined and distributed up and change the total to
When you look at page 178,
178, on 178.
No.
Well, it doesn't match those 178, it's 34,000, so if you added a line that's an adjustment to
I could do that
determine later,
to-
12,000,
to make those 2 pages match, that would be fine.
that's
Board adjustment
For
for
future.
12,000, makes the totals reconciled,
right.
allows for the flexibility.
that works.
Yeah, I can do that very easily.
I think the feeling is that you're gonna still need some project management or professional services in that regard, even if we bring things in-house. So I would like to make an amendment that we reduce it by 6,000.
I'll second.
Move
Help me out here.
12,000.
So there's,
So the motion is for 12,000 reduction, the amendment is to change that to 6,000 reduction.
from, yeah.
So the savings
And it
to
was,
property tax goes
It
from
was
12
seconded
to
by
6.
Kemi.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, any discussion?
I have a question, so, and maybe this is for when we do the professional services or more for the marketing leadership committee, but I see there's other special events that are listed here. You have the summer concerts, the Welcome Neighbors, Realtors event, and then others to be determined, and American Summit and discussion with other partners. So I don't see, for example, the bike races here, and I've heard that that's something that may or may not fall in the bid's lap, which they're not looking to have.
Well, they might,
Or maybe.
Well, the bike race is like the 7th line down
It's
on
up
your
here now,
center page.
$2,000.
That's not
That
other than
doesn't cost.
Well, what
specified.
we did with the bike race is Jim and I said, whatever happens, we have to leave X amount in the budget. So,
How much?
2,000 is what we contribute to the bike race. That's both years. If the bid reduced their contributions from 6,500 to 10,000. If they do the bike race. Now, if they give it back to us, they have to give us 6,500 if we decide to do the bike race. So, I mean, it's a kind of a wash between us. They always were the biggest contributor to the bike race, even when we did the unification of that. So if whoever decides, whoever gets the albatross,
The lucky.
that would, it would just be if they get it, we give them 2,000. We get it, they give us 6,500. That's kind of how it works. So we just did that because you take it, we take it. And both boards did not have a chance to weigh in on that yet. So that's why we did it that way. So we can't, whoever gets it, we got the money.
Yeah, and as far as the sole contractor goes, I mean, the proposal was during the realignment was that the team approach was working well for the bid at that time. And so the rationale was that if the same team, that the village piece needed a team as well, just because of the breadth of talents, skill set. So it's very hard to find that in one person or, not a firm, which firms have ups and downs. And, really the marketing leadership and advisory committee went over these options very, very carefully. And it was thought at that time that having the same contracting team for both of those contracts would actually result in a better, deliverable and a more coordinated effort and, cost savings. So again, agree or disagree, but that was the reasoning behind it. And so it wasn't an attempt to, and it really was based on market knowledge. It was the most economical way to go. We can still reduce the budget. It just reduces the program. And that's really, that may be a perfect thing to do.
Was there a request for proposal at that time?
Between both the bid and the, no, so the bid didn't want to give up their team.
Can I ask how you had any market knowledge if you didn't do an RFP? That's what an RFP is, you put it out to the market.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm not clear on how
Yeah,
you have
because the
market
choice-
knowledge.
Because the choice was to work with a firm, and the consultant that we had said, you couldn't, based on what you're paying and what you're getting, you couldn't get that with a firm.
but you wouldn't know about an
Yeah, you're right, right. So that was the market knowledge. So you asked what the market knowledge is, and I'm saying that, and whether that's acceptable to you is another story. But I'm saying that that's
Anyway,
what's
it's a minor
the
point, but generally, you don't have market knowledge until you go to the market with an RFP. But anyway.
What was I'm sorry, I'm just trying to write this down about the amendment. So
Amendment was to
Amendment 12.
reduce it
And Tammy reduce it from 6,000
from 12,000 to
12 to
6,000.
6.
And that is to be voted on as a,
That's the amendment. We vote on that first.
I just,
And if that doesn't pass, then it stays at 12. If it does pass, then the original one,
I got you.
we'll vote on it at 6,000.
very good.
Any other discussion? Okay, we'll vote on the amendment first. All in favor of the amendment to the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Passes. So now we go to the original, except it's going to be amended to from 12,000 to 6,000. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
Mr. President?
So the first one was 5-4-4-4-2, and then the second one was 5-1, I believe. Pardon?
Could I ask for a recess for?
Oh, yes.
That's a great idea.
Thank you.
It's 13.
Two, with Roman numeral two.
Yeah.
Okay.
13 and 14, I think, are related.
All right,
Okay, item 13.
Oh, okay.
13 and 14 maybe, they're both on page 180. It's, the Shorewood today, consider the tax support amount of $5,600 from the village, and consider the transfers of $5,600 also on that page.
What's the difference? Explain that, the difference in the line items.
The Shorewood today was a direct funding, 5,600, direct funding from the village tax levy. The other one's more of a transfer from the marketing fund to Shorewood today. So they're both levied.
They're both levied. Okay.
They're both levied, so there's no, we,
So it's 11,200.
5,600 each, yes.
Marketing is supported by other, there's a partnership there. I mean, it's not, the
in
people,
Shorewood today,
No, but
no,
they
the marketing
separate
is
too.
supported by, the marketing and communications fund is supported by the partners.
yes.
Correct. So the transfer from marketing,
You can say it's a less, might have to ask Mark, it's a tough question.
is that really out of our levy?
I would.
That would
say
be
yes.
my opinion. My opinion is, it's kind of a legacy transfer, but since the consolidation of the marketing group, you have the same people funding both, and then this kind of just supplanted, you know, and maintained the tradition when that was not the case.
Okay.
Oh, yes, is the answer.
Okay, I propose this reduction, and I don't want to go over and take a lot of time. I'll just say that, well, the cost of Shorewood today under the new model has like at least doubled, if not tripled, from what it was before. My main objection is that I feel the coverage of village events has a political bias to it that disadvantages certain of us and advantages others. And it's if you take the time to go back and actually examine the coverage and the articles that are written, you will see what I'm saying. So if Shorewood today was straightforward public information communication without a slant, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But I feel it's been politicized and it's inappropriate to use village levy to support one political agenda over another. So I'll move to reduce, I'll move line items both 13 and 14 to reduce support to Shorewood today in the total amount of $11,200.
Second.
Discussion? Yes?
I think that Shorewood Today has a fabulous editorial board, and they do have a great staff, and they do, and I appreciate all of them. I do think that the magazine itself could be solely funded on advertising. Rates could be increased slightly, and maybe the text, you know, a few articles might have to be removed to make it shorter, which is what we're doing in this issue, because I sit on that editorial board. So we are reducing the number of pages because the money we had left in the kitty for the 4th edition was not enough to fund the entire edition. And I still think it's going to be a fabulous edition, the winter one that's coming up. I think the stories that they've picked are fabulous in this instance. So I do feel like I'm okay with the magazine. I have a different opinion than Trustee Amenta. However, I do believe that it can be supported on advertisements alone. So for that reason, I seconded the motion.
Any other comment?
I think it's an incredible bargain for the village. I think it really communicates clearly to our residents what's going on in, and it's great. Compared to what we had before and at the price we're getting it, and the amount of communications, the calendar, all that, that's a bargain. And the partnership, I mean, we can work to reduce costs, but I think to eliminate the general support for that, I would not support that.
I know that people talk about hearing from lots of people. I don't hear from lots of people, you know, like some of you do. But I do hear about this magazine, and people really love getting it too. So, any other comments?
I think it's a great publication. We have so few local publications beyond the Ripples and this, so I fully support funding the magazine at the current level.
And I try my best with Ripples to subscribe to it, and it happens a couple times, and then it disappears right away, so I don't get it. So
Now
you can get it online, I know.
and you can renew your, they're asking for you to renew your subscription.
They don't even come back to me for it. So. Okay, call a question. All in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Oh,
Oh, wait.
What?
That's
Retract.
I like that. The proposal, that was
Nays?
the reduction. I thought we amended it. Sorry.
There was no
Um,
amendment.
What happened?
There was no amendment.
Right. Okay, all in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
2, 4. Okay,
Remember this one? Maybe we just-
now we go to,
Yeah,
What do you think, Tyler?
can I do a?
what you were voting on at the time was to give the president a $50,000 raise.
Was that
The next segment of items are the capital requests that staff had submitted that were not included in the proposed budget. But before you consider whether or not there's any inclination to add those items back into the budget, I just wanted to touch base on some comments that I heard a little while ago about moving money to support the alley program. One of the things that's critical to realize for the alley program is we had these discussions a few months ago prior to the 2016 borrowing. I looked at the engineer's analysis of the alleys and the alley needs for the next 10 years earlier today, and the 3 alley segments that were up for 2017, one segment cost $250,000, one cost $100,000, and one cost $150,000. So the board decided to only fund $250,000 of alley programs for 2017, notwithstanding the fact that the staff is going to go out and do new ratings and come back with that. Those types of patterns are consistent throughout the village. So to get an alley will cost an increase in increments of like $100,000 a crack. So moving $15,000 or $20,000 to the alley program doesn't get you more alleys. So I guess just to put that.
You can move to something else, some other kind of infrastructure, is that what you're saying? Like garbage collection or?
I mean, that's up to the board to decide.
Or just less levies.
Or just less levies, so, but if there is an indication that you want to revisit the alley discussion during the budget hearing, I would advise that you have to think in $100,000 increments. So I just wanted to throw that out before we got into the rest of the capital discussions here.
Point taken.
Can I ask then, in the budget, we budgeted $250,000 for 4,200 block Olson, between Olson and Olive, 4,300 block between Wildwood and Marlboro, and 4,400 block between Larkin and Newhall. Are you saying
That is a
only one of those-
$500,000 project described there.
Because
So now the board will have to decide.
It looks on this page like, it says in 17, the alley program identifies for reconstruction serving the following. And it doesn't have anything on there that says all three of these are not being funded. So I'd like clarification as to what we're actually funding next
Well,
year, because this is not what
My
we're.
understanding is that the board has asked Public Works to re-rate all the alleys and come up with a revised recommendation.
And bring it to the.
This is a carry forward from the original proposal. But at the 250 level, I apologize
It's
that
really
staff
misleading.
did not presume to make decisions on which alleys to fund, given the flux of that. But it just let it be stated that you can do one or
But the board doesn't even talk about road reconstruction. We don't even weigh in on what the road reconstruction plan is. But now you're saying with alleys, you just threw something in there and expected us to make a decision, but didn't ask us to make a decision? I don't follow this at all.
I'm just confused because when we voted on the 250, I was under the impression that nobody told me that would fund one alley. And so not knowing that before we went into budget deliberations is very worrisome to me.
Well, my recollection of the discussions prior to the bond issue was that staff was presenting $500,000 plans, and the board deliberately deliberated and decided that funding at that level was not what they wanted to engage in at
But
this
if I
point.
knew it was one alley, I would have had a problem with it. So I was not.
Well,
Or you can get
250 is
the other
not
two.
one alley. I think
There's 3 alleys, you can get one, or you can get the other 2. That's how the
but we
engineering.
haven't bid it yet, so and we haven't decided what alley is coming out. That's what
I
the
would
point
have
is.
changed my vote if I had known that we could only do one alley. That's all I want to say is, or I would have amended something, you know, I would have looked at the budget.
One alley is not $250,000, unless it's the long one.
Well, one of the alleys
The only
was.
one that's 250 is the long one that runs
No, there's
3 blocks. So there's one that runs 3 blocks,
both.
that's a 250.
Which one? There's not, these are all one block.
Well, I'm just saying, that's the only one that can be 250,000. I think Mark's point is, 10,000 is not gonna buy you anything. I don't think Mark was ready to talk about what alleys.
No,
He's
not one
saying-
alley.
What he's saying is that $10,000 or $15,000 extra is not gonna buy you a whole new alley. Or you can reduce the amount of borrowing you do, you can,
What is the number then? I guess that's what I'm
Well, it's a
asking.
little misleading to have a page in the capital budget saying identifying 3 segments of alleys and a cost for
What
$250,000.
page are you looking at?
Page 155, and now tell me, oh, we didn't really mean that.
so Mark, is what you're saying is that this 223 for these alleys is not a true statement?
That's road maintenance.
Maybe road
not-
maintenance.
that's
Yeah,
not
I'm
alley.
sorry, those are road maintenance. Okay. So there's no alley in here.
Well, there's a detail in the budget.
What page do you?
155.
I really think you should have Leanne explain that, Mark.
Well, we-
I think you're
We certainly
talking
can.
technical issues that are related to
I have discussed.
alleys.
Yeah.
I know you have, but I just think if it's being misconstrued as that staff did not present it fairly to 2 trustees, I think we should make sure that we have Leanne write a report to address
Sure.
concerns by our 2
Well, I don't
trustees.
think she needs to write a
So-
report, she could just
Well,
explain.
again,
I think we
my-
already have it writing. so.
what I would assert is that this document was not updated on the description of the services that could be done based on a 250 level. It's just the funding amount was changed, and that is certainly an oversight. But the decision on the funding amount was made earlier this summer when we went through the long-range plan, and also when we went through the bonding deliberations on what we wanted to fund for 2017.
But if I had known that it was one alley a year, I would have voted differently. That's all.
This
Fair
sounds like
enough.
we just need to confirm that.
Yeah, you need to
What we're-
confirm it because the financial.
I don't believe one alley's covered.
Right?
Page 16 is,
Unless it's a long
It's
alley.
right off of Mustafa's worksheets. It is the one of, well,
I
you
think
can
that is the longest.
see the green ones on this page. These are the alleys that were the original $500,000 plan. One of them is the lawn alley. I mean, and
That's three
that's,
hours.
one of the three is a lawn alley. And again, preliminary engineering estimates.
Because
And
alleys are 75 to 100,000.
for a standard block,
Which is a tenth of a mile.
that's consistent. Which is why the only predication I was trying to say is that if you want to change the scope of the work done, you need to go on $100,000 blocks, by and large.
Right, and I think that point is well taken and appreciated, but where we go from that,
Well, the only reason I want to know the information is we can't change what we've done, but going forward, if this budget is proposing us doing just one alley, I want to potentially have the authority to make an amendment. It doesn't have to be voted up or down, it could go down by the board, but I want to just know what we're doing with that 250 so I can make an adjustment in my thinking.
Here's how that goes. When we did this, Paul made the recommendation that everyone, not through a motion, that the alleys be re-rated. All alleys be because they're 3 years old, the ratings are 3 or 4 years old, and that they come back here with a recommendation on what alleys will be done for the 2017 program.
Alleys, right? So I'm just saying, if it's going to be one, I just want to know that, okay?
And
And
that's a reasonable thing.
before the
right?
budget.
And that's pending information.
I just didn't want
Yeah.
Mark to say there's only one alley, when in fact it could be 2 short ones, or even 3 short ones,
Absolutely.
or 1 long one. So I just think that should be
I
clear.
didn't mean to throw up that,
That's okay, I
Fire.
just want the information.
but I was hearing discussion about moving $10,000 for the alley program, and I just wanted to elaborate to that.
put that in context.
So-
Right.
So we know by the time we get to publishing the final budget document, or at least ought to clarify where we're at.
We gotta change these streets in our budget document, right? Or
We
not?
certainly can update that or rephrase the presentation that says that it's under review by Public Works.
What is the status and where we're at.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And maybe even take out the map, because again, the board has asked for that map to be redone. So,
I think it has
very,
to.
very, see what the end has.
Getting back to other capital projects on here. None of this is in the budget right now, none of
That
this
is
capital.
correct.
And since
Well,
the
the road
capital
maintenance is
items,
in at
since the
175.
capital items, it would be all from borrowing.
No, these would all be from tax levy.
This is all from tax levy.
We took all this from tax levy in order to get it down to 2.25%. These were things that we negotiated with the staff and saying, you can't ask for that much. We need that.
Okay, I got it.
So it's a negotiated number with our department heads.
Okay.
Mark thought,
And they're all
We should
okay,
go-
they're all okay with this?
because last year, one of you asked, I can't remember, that, what did you take off?
Yeah, I asked.
And so we wanted to make sure you had that information.
Okay, it's very clear to me.
What was the, on the faucets, that you can't get the batteries to, once they're not working, what's the plan? We just gonna, what are you
They're
gonna?
gonna come in here and use our bathroom.
No, I'm serious, I mean, there's certain, are they gonna just replace it?
Did Leanne talk to you about that particular question?
We have not, we will talk about that. I just haven't.
Okay,
The other item that I keep being concerned about is postponing the IT vulnerability thing. It's one of those things you can put off until it's too late. And then it's too late and you've been hacked and their system is, so
What was the recommendation, Chris, on taking it out? Like, did the staff feel that we could?
Well, it's something you always, I think Mike's right, it's something you can always do, it is the last thing to do, to have people take out of every budget. But, I think we have a pretty good IT consultant, and I think they've done a really good job. So I thought it was just more of a study, and I thought it was discretionary versus required. That was it. Mike makes a good point that many people make that same mistake, and I think
yeah. We routinely do it every other year.
I just think we have a great IT people that help us put it back in, because
When is the last time we did it?
I think when we did our IT study in 2013, was it? You were here, Mark?
Predated me.
It was 2013, when did you get here, 13?
Yeah.
So it was 2012. We did our own IT in 2013.
And what about the other, I wanted to know about items 16 and 17 in terms of those costs. Are there, if they've already been funded from previous budgets, you're just looking to pick it back?
Well,
If it's a postponed?
the agenda management project software acquisition was originally funded in 2016. That project has not been executed. And again, as we developed the 2017 budget, that was postponable.
And I thought 5,000 a year for maintenance was,
Okay.
my problem.
From bid, right, from what they gave you a cost for. I
just
do
thought it
want
was too
to
high.
touch on that for agenda management software. Does that have to give you more of a capability to view things online?
No. And that's part of it, but it's more, it allows Tanya to just put everything in, and it kind of, I'm making this up, it kind of just comes together and gets organized and
It's a
saves her a
wizard.
lot of time.
But,
It just, there's more to it than that, but
but it would also, according to the description, it would also allow for more things to be posted because we would have more time, right? So for,
Be more efficient.
right, let me just tell you where I'm going. I would like to see more documentation online for the public to be able to view, and in our document center for the board to be able to review. So I've mentioned that over the year, so I don't feel like I'm just bringing it up right now. This to me sounds like it could achieve some of that.
I don't see how it can, because it wouldn't add any more documents. I mean, it would give you the same document.
Again, my understanding is that it assists in compiling multiple documents in multiple formats from multiple locations into one larger packet and makes navigating that packet.
Right,
And
like you can
assembling
do
that
with
more
search
effective.
words, like,
Right.
you can search you can search for a document by keywords, which is fabulous. Like if you're looking for tax increment finance district 2, or whatever it may be, you can find it just by not knowing the name of it,
But I don't believe that it extends to modifying our website to add links to additional documents. I think those are separate processes.
So you're saying,
This is document assembly and then the ability to move within that. But creating links on the website to post to 8 additional documents or something like that, that is a separate process outside of agenda management.
I think if you figure out exactly what you want, I think there might be other programs that can do that. I can't understand exactly what you want now, but, once we can talk more about it and figure out what you want, maybe with Tyler, and figure out exactly what's not there that you're looking for, and, we can see that differently. I just don't think this is gonna help.
It's a simple operational change that if we have identified a list of things that we need to put on the website, we can do that internally.
but they're easy to upload and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be, this software will not change that.
Our difficulty is when you have to take things off, add it to the agenda, add another item. It's a long process. Maybe a half hour to review it.
So would this be cost savings for
I-
that hour per time? I
It would
mean,
be some time savings. I just,
It would save time for Tanya putting the
I
agenda
don't know if it's
together, so.
$5,000 a year worth of time.
I haven't seen the software, so I don't know.
Well,
how
it's
quickly
some
it
cost
goes,
of it,
But
too.
it would save her time
No,
putting
it's
the agenda
5,000 a year.
together for other things.
That's my,
It's
that's.
$5,000 a year for maintenance. It's $6,000
It's
to
like a lead
purchase
process.
and $5,000 a year to.
I mean, yeah, it's an additional cost that may save Tanya time, but Tanya's still gonna be here, so I mean, it may be great operationally, but without knowing what the other activities are that she's been, there's no savings in it at all that I see. I mean, if we're gonna do something technological, I think the general concept is you're doing it. It frequently doesn't work out this way, but the idea is we're using technology to be more efficient and save money somehow, and that doesn't seem to be the case here.
I don't know, I think the chief found more than $100,000 in cost from the parking, but then.
Well, that was a good example of one, but it doesn't always work out that way. This is.
But sometimes it's to save time, you can do more with the same resources.
Yeah, but what is she, I mean, we don't know.
Yeah, that's,
Right. Okay.
so I guess
Is
that
that,
is cold then, and we're ready to publish, is that?
wait, is that it? Wait a minute, I have another question. One of my items didn't make it on here that I had in my email, and it was trustee pay.
Correct.
And you mentioned there's, just to state the background, we haven't had a cost of living increase since 1972. So what I wanted to propose after I rethought this was just to start getting a cost of, that 1.5% or that 2% that other people get that work in government. Because $1,000 in 1972 is way different than what it is today. So just the basic cost of living increase, how do I go about doing that if it's not here? So what would
I
that?
think Nathan has to weigh in on trustee boards approving pay their own pay increases. I know
Well,
there's
no,
some statutory things.
it would be for the people who are elected in April.
Yeah.
So if you're talking 2% at $2,000.
Would that be just new people?
Yes, it's a new
It
people
can
in
be,
April.
Real.
or you can do it after 3 years. You can base it on a time period so that everyone would have gone through a reelection.
Oh, I was just thinking if it's two people at 2%, it's $400 or $40.
$40.
So I'm just saying, but I don't know if it's budget.
Well, if
I
they've done
would
that
rather
in
have you
1972.
talk about it. I think Mark's point about Nathan is, get together, the $40 you can find in the budget, probably, if that's what the impact is, or $100.
That's fair.
If you're gonna say that, I think you should look at the policy, broadly, decide what your strategy and long-term thing is. It just seems to
We
me.
have a number of North Shore communities that have zero pay. So when they go up, cost of living, it's 1.5% times zero. We do the math.
I just think that by allowing the cost of living increase, if you backpaid it since 1972, you could, with a little bit higher pay to bring you up to speed, we could attract people that might not be able to do it otherwise. Like some of the people that don't have the means to volunteer to come to $30,000. So, and that was my thinking. I'm fine with exploring it outside the budget.
Well, and again, I would just piggyback on that, not to draw this out, but should the board adopt a policy that is changes budgetary implication, that happens all the time.
Yeah, they do that. I've seen it.
Yeah, so,
The last time it actually got voted on that I recall was, I think, right before I came on, and Dick Ross proposed that as he was going off the board and it was voted down.
And I think that is,
And that would be
most communities do this.
1998, 1997.
The policy is really, I think Allison, I'm not prolonging it, but it's very important, the policy. Do you want people who do it for the money, or you want to do it for, and that's the conversation, I'm not saying it's right, but that has been what communities usually have looked at it. This is a stipend, or is it really a paying job? And, you have to
And
look at
stipend's
it.
fine, as long as the stipend
But that's what people
inflation,
discuss.
is adjusted for inflation, just so the stipend is the same as it would be, same amount of money it would have been in 1972. Same stipend, it's just adjusting for the fact that gas is totally different in pricing. So it's not different stipend, it's not a different amount, it's the same buying power. That's the point of the cost of living increases for everyone else.
Anything else for,
I'd like to thank everybody. It's been a long process, lots of stuff, appreciate your support. Net impact is another $10,000 of levy reduction,
It is?
basically,
Say it again?
No, it's two down. We increased professional.
well, we took boardroom chairs from 6,000 to 0, we took marketing from 45,000 to 39,000, and we increased professional education 2,000. So that is a net savings of 10,
Okay.
which just for the,
That one?
for the incline, I think that's going to end up to be about 1.85, 1.87
Okay.
on all our final documents. But I will get the gears spinning with all the staff adjustments and these adjustments, and as noted on other documents along the way, I've been making updates and put together a complete proposed for consideration.
Can you send out,
6:30,
can you send
all
out,
right, on 14, 6:30,
that's what we had.
Can
you-
What? Say it again? Oh,
The hearing, the hearing.
November 14th, budget hearing, 6:30 rather than 7:30.
Okay. 6:30 is the budget hearing.
Mark, can you just send out what the levy increases were on an annual basis for the past 10 years too?
Sure.
Thank you.
And Mark, I've been gone for a
I-
few days,
I
but
don't
I'll
think
be
it might
back,
take
and I
10
will
minutes.
have just a couple, maybe just to run through numbers.
Sure.
Still need a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Adjourned.
Who was that?